Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Watson. Thank you so much for coming to Inform Canada's symposium. We're finishing up our first day, and right now I'm happy to introduce you to, many of you know, Fade Hendry, who's is with us today to do a presentation on the journey of learning. And as many of you know, but maybe some of you don't, Fade has been in the information referral sector for many, many years. He spent 33, I believe, 34 years at Find Health and has been very involved with AIRS as it was and Inform USA as it is now. And so today, Fade is going to talk to us about what we do and what we do as information and referral specialists, but also, what are the new and necessary ways for training and onboarding and as people come to the field of information and referral. So I'm going to turn it over to Fade and take it away, Fade.
All right. Thank you very much for that introduction, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this session on the journey of learning, training, onboarding, and certification in the field of information and referral. TALK for short. I can't hardly believe this is the 48th annual symposium for information and referral specialists. That's absolutely wonderful, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. We do have an agenda, so the agenda is the next slide, and you can see what we're going to talk about today. The intended audience for this session are those that may be involved in their onboarding and training program, but also to a slightly lesser degree, those of you that are going through the onboarding and training process, specifically community resource specialists, CRSs, and those involved with data curation. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of your reflections about training, onboarding, and certification. We're going to identify some of the key requirements and resources for training and onboarding. Talk a little bit about training on technical skills versus interpersonal or soft skills, because there's a difference there, and I think it's important to acknowledge that difference. We'll talk more about considerations for training in a virtual environment versus an in-person, sort of old school classroom style that many of us, from my generation, that's what we were brought up on. But certainly the way things are moving and are going to keep moving is there's much more of an emphasis on online training. I want to spend a little bit of time also talking a little bit about the distinction and differentiation between facilitation, presenting, and training. We tend to lump those into the same category when they're in fact very different. There's certainly some intersectionality and some commonalities between facilitation, presenting, and training, but there's some significant differences as well. At the end, I hope to leave maybe 15 or 20 minutes at the end of today's presentation for discussion with you. I have some questions for you, and you may have some questions for me. So thank you. Next slide, please. Thanks. I always start off with the standards. Information referral is a standards-driven industry. And there have been standards around for the field and practice of professional information referral since 1973. So the standards are over 50 years old, and many of you are probably aware that a new version 10.0 of the standards, was just recently released last month in August. And the standard that I focus on is the standard for staff training. And the INR service provides training for new hires as well as existing staff and volunteers. The training should reflect job descriptions for individual positions and is consistent with the material in the Inform USA, formerly AIRS, Information Referral Training Manual, the Inform USA standards, and the job task analysis for community resource specialists and data curators. So they've talked a little bit about the who, but not necessarily the what, where, when, and most importantly, the how. The standards tell us, who we're training, but it really provides more of a framework and a foundation to design, develop, and deliver an effective onboarding and training program. But you as an agency or as a trainer, you need to really fill in the blanks. I'd like people just to reflect back on when they first started their job at their INR agency. For some of you, that might be, 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. I want you to think about what your onboarding and training entailed. How long was it? Was any pre-boarding done, or did they sort of just throw you in and expected you to perform from the word get-go, from day one? What resources were used in your training and onboarding? How thorough? How comprehensive was it? Do you even remember what it covered? I just want to share that I remember my first day, and it was, exactly almost 35 years ago. It was just after Labor Day in 1989. And I know part of my training involved reading the old blue pages, which was the government listings in the middle of the phone book. Those were ripped out and cellophane was put over each page, and we created a sort of a mini government directory of all the federal, provincial, regional, and local programs. And I remember, I think on my first or second day, I was told to read the blue pages. And I thought, this is really strange. We also did extensive training on the Blue Book, or the Directory of Community Services. And most information and referral agencies produced, back in the day, a Directory of Community Services for the area that they serve. I look back on that now, and I first think, first of all, there's no telephone books anymore. There's no Directory of Community Services, at least in a printed format. Everything has moved online. So while the goals and objectives of training onboarding, I think, have remained fairly consistent and remain the same, the tools and resources have changed and evolved quite dramatically and drastically. We now have webinars, online training, learning management systems. We have lots more resources, I would say, now than before. So what is information and referral training? Training in INR is a systemic process through which service navigators and data curators gain knowledge and develop skills by instruction and practical activities that hopefully result in improved performance and quality of service delivery. There are technical skills that are really job-specific abilities acquired through education and training, like resource database training. But then there are all those, what we refer to often as soft skills, which aren't really that soft at all, are more sort of interpersonal in nature. And these are personality character traits such as the ability to communicate effective, active listening skills, problem solving, assessment, and teamwork. And really, when we talk about interpersonal skills, we look at really simply how we relate to others. And I think that's what information and referral is largely about. It's about how we relate to the clients that we're serving. It's about engagement. It's about connection. And I think a lot of organizations invest a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort on onboarding and training both their community resource specialists and data curators. You have both internal, homemade, and external resources at your disposal. What I would suggest, though, if you are actually on this call and you are an INR trainer, I would argue there are probably significantly fewer resources for information and referral trainers. Many of us, like myself, who may be responsible for INR training, have never really been formally trained as trainers. Very few agencies that I've come across have a designated person solely devoted to training. So you may be a supervisor of quality assurance, and training is part of your portfolio. Usually it might be a supervisor, a coordinator, or a team lead within the ION organization that is responsible for providing training and onboarding, in addition to many other responsibilities. So training and onboarding is usually just one of several responsibilities assigned to the person responsible for training and onboarding. In this slide, you see a listing of activities and timelines, and I just want to spend a moment to talk about activities and timelines. I would strongly argue that the training and onboarding should actually be part of almost the hiring process. Um, this is where training actually begins. Oftentimes, when I'm interviewing a candidate for a position within the INR organization, it might start off by just asking yourself, is this candidate trainable? How receptive will the candidate be to training? Are they clear about the expectations and roles and responsibilities? And trainability really refers to someone's ability to learn new things quickly and efficiently. And it's a crucial trait that indicates how receptive an individual is to being taught and trained in new roles or systems. Pre-boarding is really important. If you've hired someone as a community resource specialist or a data curator, many people, before they start a job, feel that period of anxiety before they actually start on day one. You want to keep them really eager and engaged during this stage. During pre-boarding, you may want to share things like your organization mission, your employee handbook. You may want to provide them with the URL to your website. During the pre-boarding, your new hire is likely to be crackling with a lot of nerves and excitement. Can I do this job? What is this job going to actually entail? Don't let that energy go to waste. Channel some of that fire into completing administrative tasks to avoid that first full day of what we call busy work, where they're just filling out forms and, logging in and getting passwords. Nobody wants to spend their entire first day signing forms and setting up accounts. Give your new hires an opportunity to get a real head start, clearing the way for certainly, hopefully, a more exciting day one at the office. The anxiety the anxiety someone can feel when starting a new job is always, I think, accelerated or exacerbated, but not knowing the key details. So share important information with new hires before they actually start. Stay connected. That may be you, but it also may be a function of the INR HR team as well. Time frame. Probably everyone on this call has a different time frame for how long their onboarding period will last. In my research and review of organizations that I've worked with who are going through the Inform USA AIRS accreditation process, most organizations use a 2 to maybe 5 or even 6 week window for their onboarding before community resource specialists are actually taking their first call. But I think it's important to be flexible. Some people learn more quickly than others. Other new staff members may take a little bit more time to get up to speed. And then there's training and professional development, which is really an ongoing process. These could be in-service trainings, guest speakers that you invite to your agency to do a workshop or webinar. Some of the trainings I know for community resource specialists are the ASSIST training, which is the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills training, or training on things like trauma-informed care. And then there may be those trainings that are mandated by your organization or even provincially. So here in Ontario, I know all our staff that start are required to take the AODA training on customer service, which is the Accessibility with Ontario Disabilities Act. I know recently many 211 providers and many nonprofit organizations have also had their staff go through cybersecurity training. But there's no shortage of training that you can arrange for either your community resource specialists, to a lesser extent data curators, but there's still some training for them as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then finally, certification, and I think agencies, and I certainly Inform USA, urges people to become certified either as data curators or community resource specialists. And certification is important because it helps minimize risks. I think it can help enhance consumer protection, and it may improve outcomes for the actual clients. Certification is really a stamp of approval for the staff member that they acknowledge and are aware and can apply the standards for professional information and referral. It's also, I think, a helpful tool if people want to, change, locations. For example, we see a lot of community resource specialists who have worked in many different 211s or area agencies on aging or other information centers. So it's a helpful tool for portability. I think all this sort of next slide, please, Marcus. Thank you. So you should also have an onboarding checklist, and this is not an exhaustive list, but you should have a checklist because there really is so much to training and onboarding, particularly onboarding, that it's not just about answering the phone or maintaining a resource database. In most of the onboarding checklists I've seen, there's probably anywhere from 50 to 60 items that need to be covered. So this list you're seeing here is not an exhaustive list, but it gives you an idea of some of the things that should be covered during the onboarding period. So they should be aware of their mission, vision, values, some of your policies and procedures like confidentiality. I always find that people who are new to an organization are always more knowledgeable about the agency's mission, visions, and values and issues around confidentiality because they're fresh in mind. So even though that's something important for new staff, it's something more experienced staff should revisit from time to time. So if I were to ask everyone on this call, what is your organization's mission? What is its vision? What is its values? Some of us may know it and be able to recite it off the top of our heads. I think many of us, however, would struggle. They should also be provided with clarity on the job expectations, the roles and responsibilities, the lines of communication and channels of reporting. So you want to talk about the organizational structure and key policies and procedures like confidentiality, duty to report, follow-up, advocacy, crisis intervention, and these are all part of the standards. For data curators, the things that we've just talked about in terms of mission, vision, values, organizational structures, policies, and procedures apply to them equally. But in addition to data curators, you may want to provide an orientation on your style guide, the taxonomy, classification indexing system, how to update a record, the data verification process. I think the systems that we're using now have changed. I remember the first phone system I worked on was actually an old rotary black and white phone. And now our phone system is very, I would say, cutting edge. It's complex to learn. We usually have just a 3-hour system on the phone system. So that would involve things like how to access the teleinterpreter service, or how to make a 3-way call, how to stop a call recording from occurring if the client wishes that. Many INR organizations are also providing multi-channel access to information, either through chat, text, or some social media platforms. You want to train on the information and assessment and referral process. And these are some of where the soft skills come in that are actually quite challenging and difficult to train on and impart on. contact documentation, crisis intervention, lethality assessments, dealing with difficult or challenging clients, and application of diffusing or de-escalating strategies. Not to mention the whole human service system. You have key programs and services. You may have specialized helplines that you run in addition to a general community helpline or a 211 service. You may run a 988 number, or you may run a street helpline for people experiencing homelessness, or you may run a mental health support line. So understanding all the programs and services, not only that your agency runs, but also some key programs and services that are in the community. And even the N11 numbering system. I'm amazed how many people don't know about the N11 numbering system. Understanding geography, service area, understanding your clients, cultural competencies. There's so much more to train on as well. But it just demonstrates that providing information and referral isn't easy, but we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our new hires, and we owe it most importantly to our clients to have well-trained staff who are responding to clients who have inquiries. Next slide, please, Marcus. Thank you, sir. So what are some of the resources that you use, your own internal resources? And you need to have this. You just can't rely on, the resources that are provided by Inform USA. But you don't need to invent the wheel. So some of your own internal resources, and I really like using things like call recordings because it's sort of black and white. It's there. So call recordings and simulations. You may want to develop your own specific role plays that reflect your INR and your community and constituency that you serve. You may want to do some database searching exercise. Here are 20 questions. How would you find appropriate information and referrals using our database, whatever database that is? What are your own internal policies and procedures that are specific to your organization or your community? So it's really helpful to have your own internal resources, but you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Inform USA has come a long way with the development of training manuals. So this year there are 3 volumes for the Inform USA INR training manual. So there's a new manual, volume 1, which is specifically geared more particularly for managers, supervisors, leaders, or people involved in the onboarding process. There's a whole new section on an overview of the human services system. There's a whole new section dedicated specifically to the onboarding process for community resource specialists and data curators. And there's a whole new section also on contact center management that looks at things like key performance indicators, KPIs, and metrics, and how to provide coaching and how to provide feedback to the employees that you're overseeing. Volume 2, or part 2, is community resource specialists. These are for the frontline folks that are providing INR service delivery. And there are 19 sections for this. It's quite large. I think it's probably about 600 or 700 pages. This talks about the principles of information and referral, special populations that you might be serving, like clients with mental health issues, or serving people with substance abuse disorders, serving people who've been victims of intimate partner violence. There's sections on advocacy, confidentiality, crisis intervention, advocacy, and every year there's usually 1 or 2 new chapters added. So it's been growing, evolving, and developing over, I would say, the last 10 to 12 years. And then there's volume 3, which is really a whole new area, an updated area, specifically related to the folks that are responsible for data curation. So, style guide, data verification process, inclusion criteria, indexing and classification system, record maintenance, things of that nature. And then there are things you can access, like the Inform USA Learning Management site. This site has actually more than 100 different courses that are specifically related to information and referral provision, and are primarily geared to both the CRS and the data curator. You may want to log on to get more information about the Inform USA Learning Management. There's also free webinars and resources available from the Inform USA site. The job task analysis is really something that can be used for certification preparation, as well as a new Inform USA Certification Candidate Handbook that has just been put out this year. So that's new, and it's available from the Inform USA website. The job task analysis really looks at the domains of work, the tasks performed within those domains, together with what are the skills and knowledge that both community resource specialists and data curators need to have to execute their duties. These are really performance-based competencies. And then finally, there's some new things that are coming down the pike. Even today, micro-certification or designation in INR coaching. So that's for those folks who may provide quality assurance or feedback to the staff that are answering inquiries. There's a new one that's just being launched as a pilot test for supervision in INR. So that will be another micro-certification, and they're looking at doing some other ones as well, maybe even a micro-certification for training and a micro-certification for data curation management. So those are some new tools and resources that are available to folks. So next slide, please, Marcus. Thank you. So who? This is the who, what, why, when, and where, and how of it. So who are we training? So obviously we're training primarily the community resource specialists and data curators. That's our primary role. But I think it's also to be mindful that, supervisors, managers, directors, they also may need, ongoing training and support as well. So you can keep going down, Marcus. What are we training on? Well, we're training people to become, competent in the skills that they have been assigned to perform. So the performance-based competencies. So we're training them on things like, we're training them on how to use iCarol. We're training them on how to use the phone system. We're training them on how to, update a record. We're training them on how to, verify that a record has been updated. So there's lots of things that we're training them on. We're training them to provide staff with the tools, skills, and knowledge necessary for them to execute their duties effectively. We want to provide exceptional service delivery to the clients who are using the services. And when we're training them, well, we're training them at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, and at all points in between. What I'll say to you is that training should not stop. And I find some of the staff in INR who are sometimes the most resistant to change have been the ones who've been in that position the longest. So just because someone has been in the position for a long time doesn't necessarily mean that they're not in need of further training and development. I think sometimes those are the candidates who can most benefit from training and professional development. Where? In person and online. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I want to stress that if you are hiring new staff and bringing on new staff, if at all possible, it's much more advantageous to train in person than it is online. However, I recognize that's not always possible. During the pandemic, there were a number of provinces who launched 211 or other INR centers and services during the pandemic where it simply was not possible or even allowable to do in-person training. But even before the pandemic, there was a lot of online training occurring. But I think specifically for onboarding, just for reasons of inclusivity and making people feel part of a team and getting connected, if at all possible, it's much better to train in person. How? Well, there are a number of conditions and caveats for this. I think it's important to incorporate various instructional methods into your training. So that could be workshops, various e-learning platforms, self-directed learning. Job shadowing is very effective, and I think it's come a long way. The key is to really cater to different learning styles, make it interactive and participatory. From my experience, I found that people learn best by doing. The key is motivation and engagement. And I think it's critical that as a trainer, you want to demonstrate energy, engagement, and enthusiasm. Because if you are not engaged, energetic, and enthusiastic, how can you expect your new hires to be? And oftentimes, what I find when I'm doing training is that there is what I would refer to as a mirror effect. Oftentimes, the participants, the class, the new hires will mirror the energy and enthusiasm that the teacher or the trainer is exemplifying. The why and how of it, you can move on to the content, Marcus. Thank you. Why is providing effective training and onboarding important for on-hire staff? Let's face it, it's an investment, and it takes a lot of time, energy, effort, resources, and coordination. But the benefits are usually with a good onboarding program, you get clarity and better aligned expectations. It's also been proven that a strong and effective onboarding program can increase retention by 82%. And that's what you want to do. You want to retain people that you've hired. You don't want consistent attrition or turnover. If that's occurring, that may be an indication that something might not quite be working out correctly with your onboarding and training program. It helps create better production rates and improved skills. People can handle inquiries more effectively and efficiently. You tend to get a more skilled and cohesive unit, skilled and cohesive team. It also is good for increasing that camaraderie or team chemistry and inclusivity that's really, really important. We shouldn't be providing information referral in silos. We need to sort of connect and support and engage with one another. And that's one of the advantages, I think, of doing that in person as well. And I think probably a lot of INRs are still sort of maybe in that hybrid pattern where they might be 2 days in the office, 3 days at home. But there are, certain advantages and disadvantages for both, working at home and working at the office, and better outcomes for clients. So let's move on to online versus face-to-face facilitation. So what are some of the differences and important considerations for, oh, sorry. You're right, Marcus. I'm sorry, I messed my pages up here. So how do we onboard? Here are some best practices and considerations for your onboarding. And again, think about training on interpersonal and soft skills. So soft skills can't be taught only through standard educational means like manuals or one-day training courses. Soft skills are really more attitudinal or behavior-based, so they must be learned differently. Instead of downloading information and following step-by-step instructions, soft skills are acquired through coaching and an employee's conscious shaping of his or her own actions. Soft skills improvement really requires a willingness to change. And I find it hard. How do you teach someone to be an effective listener? Or how do you teach someone to be able to conduct a good or effective assessment? Soft skills aren't as easily quantified as technical skills, which makes evaluating the employee's current skills and growth a little bit more challenging or difficult. There aren't certificates given out for things like teamwork or adaptability or active listening because those skills are hard to measure objectively. Soft skills are behaviors that must be observed rather than tested for, making, a manager's or supervisor evaluations and feedback tools the best ways of measuring behavior. Set clear goals and have a schedule for your onboarding. People should know what to expect even before day one of their onboarding. Plan and prepare, just don't wing it. People will know if you're winging it. They can sense that. Um, and also, you'll feel more confident and prepared to deliver a solid training and onboarding program if you're planned and prepared. Personalize the onboarding and training experience. One size does not fit all, but you want to make that training and onboarding experience your own, but you want to tailor it and adjust it to meet the needs of the people you're training and onboarding. Be intimately familiar with your training and onboarding content, and don't be afraid to tinker or change or innovate or try new things. That's how good training often occurs, trying different things. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You're still in a sort of a simulated environment, but you want to try new things and new activities as part of your training and onboarding process. The onboarding process should have a logical flow and be sequenced accordingly. So you want to, order your training techniques from light to heavy, never from heavy to light. So, for example, on day one, you wouldn't start off a community resource specialist with, this is how we conduct a lethality assessment, or this is how we do crisis intervention. Similarly, you don't want to, tell a data curator, I want you to memorize the 11,000 taxonomy terms. You want to order your training from light to heavy, not from heavy to light. The cadence of the training schedule should be customized to what they need to learn as they are integrated into their new role and integrated into the organization as a whole. Thank you, Marcus. You can move on. Online versus face-to-face training. We're doing a little bit of both. And I think for someone like myself, I think online training is really beneficial in many ways, but it's something that I know when I first started, I had a lot of fear. I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of trepidation. I had a lot of fear, anxiety, and trepidation just about using Feedloop today. But we have to overcome, some of those challenges and sometimes take a leap of faith. But we have moved training from the proverbial physical classroom to the online classroom. And this was even occurring, I think, before the pandemic, before COVID. Next slide. So I think there are advantages and disadvantages to both. I think there's some people who really like doing things online and doing things maybe from the comfort of their own home. Other people might like the engagement and the connectivity and the camaraderie that you get from being in a classroom environment, a lot more sort of spirit. Online training, people raise their hands, they use emoticons, and they incorporate such techniques as polling or threaded discussion boards, breakout rooms. I love breakout rooms. I think they work wonderfully in online training. Even little things. So, for example, when I'm in a classroom delivering a presentation, I tend to walk around and, meet and greet people. When you're actually delivering something online, like we're doing now, you're pretty much stationary. You're pretty much tied to that computer. You're tied to the screen. So one thing I always encourage, particularly on onboarding, and make this mandatory. I can't make it mandatory for everyone, but when I'm doing, let's say a virtual webinar or training webinar, I prefer people to have their camera on. I like to see people's expressions. I want to know that people are paying attention, or am I just talking to a blank screen? So right now, I can't see anyone. I don't see people. Maybe that's my lack of ability to use this particular application, but I like to see that feedback. I like to see that engagement. The other thing is technology itself can be both an enabler and it's a barrier. It allows participants to attend from anywhere, regardless of location. So sometimes you're getting a bigger crowd, but it also requires basic things like a stable internet connection and the knowledge of the participant or the user of how to participate and engage. There may be sometimes audio issues or other technical problems that you really can't stop the show and say, I'm going to help you with this technical issue. The show must go on. Little things too. I'm always amazed, and I'm sure this has happened to everyone on this call here today, is that someone raises their hand, you call on them to provide the answer or share their experience or provide details, and they're talking and they're on mute. I know that's happened to me probably a dozen times. Probably happened to some people today as well. And that's, there are going to be some issues from time to time with the technology, either self-induced or induced by, poor internet connection. The bottom line is I think you need to sail or skate through these issues. You can't spend time during a session to address other participants' technical problems, but you need to be well versed on your own technology and how to use it. And also, certain activities that you build into a classroom setting may not work well online, or vice versa. There's certain activities I think that work better online. Don't assume that what works well in a classroom will work well online, or vice versa. So next slide, please, Marcus. I want to thank Marcus for doing this. This is sort of like, it's always really good to have someone to assist with these things. So thank you, Marcus. Presenting, training, and facilitating. What is the difference? I think a lot of times we just, lump these all together, presenting, training, and facilitating. We don't really think about what the difference is. So a presenter is really a provider of information, and really as a presenter, your goal or objective is to be engaging and to present information in a dynamic and interesting way. A presentation is simply an activity in which someone shows, describes, or explains something to a group of people. So some of you, this is sort of the United Way campaign time. I know many of you may be United Way funded agencies. So you may have to do a 5-minute speech or a presentation for the United Way Speakers Bureau. Or many of you may also be involved in outreach events where you go to talk to a group of people about your programs and services. That's simply a presentation. Training really is the goal or objective is using an engaging delivery to increase a participant's level of knowledge or skill. You want to train them to do something. A trainer is a catalyst for learning. And training is the action of teaching a person a specific skill or type of behavior. And you train staff because you want them to be able to perform a specific task or skill. Facilitation, on the other hand, is more about managing group dynamics, the ability to guide effective group work. It is designed to support collaborative group work. So you may be facilitating a discussion around your strategic or operational planning. You may be facilitating a group of end users on your website on how to improve accessibility features. So there's different facilitation. And as you can see by this slide here, and we've divided those down into 3 categories or domains of presentation, training, and facilitation. So presenting is really more about you as the presenter. The focus is on the content, and the deliverable is really, information, energy, and inspiration. And you're really talking most of the time. You're presenting something. So it's usually 90 or 80% telling, 10 or 20% listening. While training, you're focusing both on the content and the process. And the deliverable here is the augmentation or the enhancement of skill development. Then you show, you teach, you involve. And so that is more sort of a 50-50 proposition, 50% teaching or showing, and 50% listening for feedback. Have they understood the training session? Can they apply what we've just shared with the staff? Can they use this information? So you're going to be looking for clues, feedback clues, to determine if the person has really absorbed the information that you've provided and can use the information that you've provided. Well, facilitation is much more strictly focused on process. It's really much more about group dynamics and insight and group decision making. You ask, you guide, you steer, you help them sort of navigate the process, but you don't have necessarily a vested interest in the outcome. And really, it's much more about listening. It's about 80 to 90% listening and soliciting input and feedback, and maybe 10 to 20% speaking. Facilitation is really less persuasive. It's more about managing group dynamics and being more neutral. While training is more about content, more interested in the transference of knowledge and skill. It's much more persuasive and more about individual learning. So that leads us to our last slide. I think we have about 10 minutes left. So these are some questions and considerations for you. I'll also take any questions that you may have. How much onboarding is too much? Sometimes when I've been onboarding, I've been doing a lot of onboarding, particularly during the pandemic, and I'll be honest with you, it was very frustrating because it was constantly cycles of onboarding. It felt like onboarding was like the never-ending story. And it was frustrating, I think, for those people being onboarded as well, because after a certain period of time, they're chomping at the bit to, assume their role as a community resource specialist. They want to answer the phone. They want to get down to brass tacks. So for a data curator, let me, update these records. Let me begin my job. So how much onboarding is too much? Does your onboarding address cultural or generational differences? Who's responsible for onboarding and training at your INR? How do you measure the quality of your onboarding program? How do you know it's hitting its mark and achieving its objectives? How do you train on soft skills? I hope that someone has some good suggestions for this, because that's actually training on soft skills is hard. And what are some of your training and onboarding challenges? Because the reality, I think, is 90% of what people will learn is not necessarily during the onboarding or pre-boarding phase. It's learned by actually doing the job. So something I say to staff all the time, whether they're my own staff or other staff, is that every interaction you have with a client presents itself as a learning process. And in fact, a lot of people will automatically forget stuff they learned during the onboarding process. So how much onboarding is too much onboarding? But you don't want to be throwing them on the phones on day one either. So I think it's, it's sort of a difficult, tricky question to answer. Thank you, everyone. I'll be happy to take any questions that anyone might have, or if anyone wants to answer some of those last questions about challenges and how we train and onboard, how much training or onboarding is too much. And we have a few minutes left before we wrap up for the day. Michelle or Marcus, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, I'm here, and I'm happy to help coordinate any questions. So far, we don't have any questions in the chat, but maybe people are just formulating their questions as I speak.
Well, I don't have a question. It's Marcus. But I'd say that everyone should have the opportunity to go in blindly and do Fate's PowerPoint presentation by listening to him. It's good listening exercise and keeping me on track.
Yeah. Good
And
point, Marcus.
Sometimes people were calling me and it just interrupted my flow there. So.
You did very well, Marcus.
Yes, thank you, Marcus. I appreciate it. Maybe everyone's exhausted, Michelle, after a very long day of attending sessions.
Well, that's possible, or they've just that you've said everything there possibly is to say
I
about
don't,
onboarding, and
I don't,
they can't think of another thing.
I don't think that's the case. There's probably always something more to say about um, onboarding and training. And I harken back. Do you remember when you were onboarded during the pandemic, Michelle?
Oh, yes, I do.
I'll just share that, sometimes you don't have time to onboard staff the way you'd really like to onboard them. So during the pandemic, obviously, everyone on this call today, you saw a dramatic increase in your call volume. And so it necessitated a movement to all hands on deck. So I think Michelle was onboarded in a record time of 4.5 hours or something. Here's your headset here, because information and referral. But it probably wasn't, in hindsight, really fair to you to be onboarded that sort of quickly. And normally, if we would onboard you, it would be a much more smooth process. But sometimes you don't have the luxury, and that's why sort of disaster preparedness is one of those standards. Like, what happens? Are you able to ramp up? Are you able to increase and meet the demands of the community that you're actually serving? And that's why organizations should, according to standards, have a business contingency plan and a disaster preparedness plan that they're able to ramp up during times of disaster or emergency. And certainly that was the case for many INRs and many helplines during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
So any questions? It's a quiet group today.
A very quiet group today.
Teresa, thank you, my friend. I also had a whirlwind onboarding to help chat. Yeah, thank you. I remember that too. And now more and more people are using the chat feature. It's sort of interesting. I just came from a session just to show you where training is at right now in information and referral. For some reason, this is sort of a crazy week. So this morning, there was a session at the Mennonite New Life Center of Toronto, the BESIP program, which is Building Employment Supports to Immigrant Populations. And it's a bridging program for people with foreign trained experience to become settlement workers. So there was a whole stream this morning on information and referral. This afternoon, there was a session in Halton region at Sheridan College, the conference center, where this was handled one time before. And it was on, effective or promising practice strictly for referral provision. And now Marco is doing a session there right now on digital communication and transformation for settlement services sector. Right now, there's also Inform USA is running a frontline service delivery. They're calling it community roundtables for people who want to just bring up certain issues or challenges they're facing as frontline information and referral providers. So there is lots more training available, and I think it's important that people find out about it, because I think there was very few training resources or options when I started. Hence, that's why I was probably asked to read the blue pages of the telephone book. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Hind. I see some of these. Are there any questions?
Doesn't seem like there's any questions, Faye.
Okay.
But thank you so much for being with us. You've had a busy day today, and
My pleasure.
We really appreciate you coming to speak to us to finish off this concurrent session of the first day of the Inform Canada Symposium. And so thank you so much, Fade. And I know you'll continue to be someone we can call upon for training and really learning in our sector. And I also want to just remind everybody that tomorrow we start at 11 a.m. Eastern time again. with our town hall, and then some, you do refer to your program for all of the other um, for all of the other wonderful sessions that we have planned for you coming tomorrow. So yes, Marcus says you will never retire. Got to get some pickleball there.
Occasionally, it's great. But thank you, Marcus, for inviting me, and thank you, Michelle. It's wonderful. It's nice to see some familiar, names, if not faces. So thanks everyone for attending, and I hope everyone has a great day too of the Inform Canada Symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.